All right, welcome to part 3 on insider risk management. So the first part, as you remember, we just went through some of the information or insider risk management settings, how to just basically get a few things set up that you might want to get set up, how we can, some of the common settings that are just good to set up, and some of the things that we need to set up. Turning on analytics, for example, allowing applications to report insider risk and those sort of things. And then we went and we kind of did a little tour of the insider risk management admin center, sort of just kind of overview of this here. Went through some of this. Today, we're going to actually go into policies. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at policies, and then we're going to kind of take a look at cases here. I'm not going to go deep dive, but we're just kind of give you some ideas here on some policies. And so here we are back inside purview.microsoft.com, and we went over to solutions, and we went down to insider risk management. Now, from there, we're going to go into policies. So let's go into policies. And I've got several that I've created here that we've got some, active alerts on, and we'll take a look at those as time permits as well. But we're going to go in and just create a policy. So there's a couple things we can do. One, we can go in and we create a quick policy, and we can just say, okay, we're going to focus on data leaks. We can focus on data theft from Microsoft apps. When users are leaving the organization. So it's detect potential information or data theft from Microsoft 365 cloud apps by users leaving your organizations or whose account was deleted from 365 Entra or Entra ID. We can go into email exfiltration, risky AI usage, etc. Probably by far the most common is either data theft when a user is getting ready to leave your organization, or we can just do data leaks. And I have some data leak stuff down here, but we'll just go ahead and walk through this. Now remember, this is a quick create policy. So basically, we can go in here, and it's going to kind of sort of lay some groundwork for what the policy is going to do, and then really basically we can just go in and create this policy as is by just giving it a simple name here. Let this load. Oh, there we go. So we can go in and just kind of give it a name. What's the scope? We can specific users, or do we want to say all users in groups? Of course, recommended for best coverage if you want to, manage this. So the indicators, we talked about indicators. So indicators is what are we hitting on? What are we targeting? What's the scope of the risk that we're looking at? In this case, sharing SharePoint files with people outside the organization, SharePoint folders, downloading content from SharePoint, syncing content from SharePoint, downgrading labels, etc. So there's quite a few things here we can really hit on, and we can go in and customize this. So we can go in and we can choose this policy template, for example. So we're talking about data leaks. We can do this based on, these are all optional, DLP, devices onboarded, physical badging. We kind of talked a little bit about that. We're not going to really need to touch any of this at the moment. We're going to go in here, and we, of course, give it a name and a description. And then we're going to go in and we're going to apply this to all users. And then we can say any excluded, nothing. Now I can say prioritize content. So when you prioritize content, their risk scores are increased for any activity that contains priority content. So it's just, it becomes a priority. I'm not going to at this point. I'm just going to go next here. And here's where we can go in and add some of the more indicators. We can turn on indicators. Of course, we can just say, if a user matches a DLP policy, then what DLP policy is it a match? And that just becomes a hit. And so in this case, we're just going to go and we're going to say when a user performs an exfiltration activity, policy will start assigning risk scores when specific thresholds are detected for an activity, right? So here are these, and of course we can go in, and I believe pretty much everything is turned on. Now we can go in and turn on additional ones here that we can. It tells you, indicators you turn on here will be available to configure for all insider risk policies for your organization. So in any case, we've got pretty much everything. Downgrade or remove label content, then exfiltrate. We're good there. But again, we can go into You know, if something isn't able to be turned on, it's just because we haven't turned it off in the organization. So we can go in and turn them on if we want, but we're just going to go next here. And now we can apply Microsoft thresholds. Now here's the thing, and I mentioned this before, that Microsoft thresholds aren't really known. They're not really telling us what they are. They're just recommending. Now, here's an idea of some thresholds that we can set. So downloading content from SharePoint, total number of activities, 300 per day. Okay, number of activities. Remember, we talked about these thresholds, that this is what we consider to be unusual, not necessarily unusual for the user. And so that's where I think it's probably best to just use Microsoft thresholds here. Again, we don't really know what they are, but we can tweak those. So the policy will start assigning risk to scores to activity only when specific thresholds are met for exfiltration activities you selected as the triggering event. Thresholds are based on the number of events recorded for an activity per day. You can recommend thresholds or you specify your own. So we go next here. Here are those indicators. So we can choose indicators here. We can see that we have for Office, we have 11 and 13 selected. Device, we're not doing device on this one. Physical address, indicators, we're not doing any of that. So, and then some of these are more, are going to be, consumable type license, more pay as you go, etc. So we can, if we have that set up, then we can choose additional ones there. But we're pretty much good on the indicators. These are the sharing people outside the organization. Sharing outside the organizations, base variant, sharing SharePoint folders with people outside the organization, sharing SharePoint sites with people outside the organization, syncing content from OneDrive. Again, these are things that becomes all of a sudden unusual, right? And so we can go in and add more of the stuff that we want, removing sensitivity labels from files, so we can just determine what do we want to do here. So we're going to go next, and then basically, okay, so detection options. Okay, we can again choose more of these that we want. Threshold type for indicators. Apply thresholds provided by Microsoft. Built-in thresholds will be applied to all indicators you selected. Apply these thresholds specific to users' activities. Thresholds based on your user's recent activity patterns will be applied to all built-in activities. So it's checking recent activity for that particular user. This is generally what I do on the recommended here. And then that's it. And then we can submit that policy and basically use that policy. Okay. The other option we have here is to create a custom policy. And this basically walks us through the same thing. We just have to really choose everything on the way. I tend to, it's pretty much the same, although we do have custom policies, so there are different templates here. But if we do data leaks, we have now, if we start data leaks down, this is pretty much what we just saw in the quick policy. But we do have data theft by departing users. So if you have an HR connector, a physical badging, cloud application. So these are some connectors that we can set up. It's basically HR saying this person's given a notice, this person's last day is this, and it's all done with CSV files and so forth. But not going to go into a whole lot of detail with that, but it is there. There's an article on that as well as physical badging. Beyond that, a lot of this is really exactly the same as what we've just seen here. We can do, exfiltration policy. I'm not going to really go through all of this, but we get a meaningful description, and then really it's just the rest of it is pretty much what we've done before here. And it's almost exactly the same. So we won't go through all of that. Now, I have some adaptive protection policy, and I believe this is kind of more of a built-in policy here, but you can see here we've got users in scope. There's 2 users, and I have an IRM malicious data leak policy. Okay, this is actually applying to particular users, so I can go in here and look at this. The other ones are there's no active users in here, and often these warnings and recommendations are, hey, you might want to change your thresholds because you're really not hitting any data. That's basically kind of what it's saying. We're going to go into this policy, and we're going to see real-time real-time analytics now available for this policy. Add the policy to reveal real-time analytics. So that's kind of that one recommendation. We can look at the policy settings, get an idea for what the policy is doing here. We can go in and edit this policy. Okay. Beyond that, we can go in here and go into start scoring activities for users. Okay, so this is immediately start assigning risk scores to users based on activity detected by the policies you selected. And so this just kind of gives us this just kind of gives us this this alert here. And so we'll pull this in. This is, again, it's just telling us that there are some things going on here. We can go then into alerts. Let's take a look at alerts here, and we'll see that we have that particular malicious policy here. Oops, needs review. That's okay. Fine. We'll go in. We'll take a look at it. And this is where it's going to tell us, all of the activities, right? So it's just basically file access on SharePoint. Now, this policy, I've set it to where it's going to be pretty chatty. There's going to be a lot of hits here because I'm doing like, probably very low thresholds or whatever. So I wanted to get some content in here, some data, but it tells us literally, if I were to look at sensitive response received, I can look at the data. So here is literally the Copilot activities that I've asked it to do. For example, that's a Copilot interaction, but I can say file access on SharePoint online. Here's the file. But literally we can go in and look, and this is sensitive information type. So it really gives me a lot of information here, but it tells me that activity that generated this particular alert is 47 events, 24 events. So we can really drill into these real specifically. Now I can dismiss this alert and the alert goes away. Hey, that's no problem. It's fine. It's totally cool. But we can also then go in and create a case. So I can confirm all alerts and create a case, or I can confirm the alert without creating a case. So if I go in and create a case, it's basically give it a case name. I can say IRM SPO access. I can say Alan Cox, whatever. We can go in and do all of that. We can go in and create a case. I can create these optional notes if I want. Okay, so I can open the case. Okay, let's just click done there, and let's go over to cases. So if we go over to cases, we can see that it's active. Okay, it's unassigned. Okay, so let's go into this case, and this just kind of gives us this little bit of a digital trail of what are we doing with this case, right? And so at this point, I can go in and just look at everything that's happening here. Detected words, kind of what triggered this. There's just a lot here. We're not really going to go into all of the detail here, but here I can escalate for investigation. That's basically going to send it over to, that's basically going to send it on up to eDiscovery. Okay, so just a lot we can do. Content Explorer to kind of drill into it. User activities, etc. I can assign this to somebody. So I can say, yeah, somebody, I'm going to investigate myself. So I can assign this to somebody that can work this case and figure it out. What happened, what's going on, is there any there, etc. So that is kind of an insider risk and how that works. But again, we got the alerts related to that. We've got the user activity. This is kind of the user activity, kind of the scatter of what's happening here. So there's AI usage, there's collections, there's, there might be some, just all, collections, deletions, exfiltration, kind of what's happening. Kind of gives you this trail here, right? And that's a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month. We can go to Activity Explorer to drill into the activity itself. So just a lot here, really. Any case notes? Okay, so that is some insider risk, kind of how we deal with policies, how we create policies. When we create a policy, what do we do with those alerts, those hits, those matches, and then how do we escalate that into a case and then move it from there? So hopefully this has been helpful for you as we conclude this insider risk management. Again, hope it's been helpful, and thanks for watching.